Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 947. My opponent here started off with d4, and I decided to go for a Nimzo-Indian if he allowed it, and he did. He played the normal moves here. I go e6, and of course you can avoid the Nimzo with knight f3, and then black has to come up with some other line against that, but knight c3 is a fine way to play. I play that way with white as well, but it does allow the Nimzo-Indian with bishop b4. And queen c2 is the most popular move these days. e3 is kind of like the old main line. I like to play that way, but queen c2 is fine. The classical variation. And now I play c5. And here the main move is taking the pawn, which he didn't do. He played a3, which is quite a rare move in this position. After taking, you have the choice of, you can ignore it for a while and castle immediately. You can also round it up with knight a6, but usually I just take with the bishop, and that seems to be fine as well, although there is this question mark move in the database. But looking at it with the chess engine, it seems fine. Anyway, that's not how the game went. The game went a3. In fact, it seems like white is kind of mixing different systems. This early a3 is typical of the Samish variation, whereas this queen c2 move is the classical variation, as I said. And I don't know if they really go that well together. It's not played very often. If he had taken with the queen, I was wondering about this line, if you could play knight e4. It seems to be playable, but not not especially good. So you can drop the queen back to c2, hitting the knight. I was planning to play f5 and go for an attack on the f file. You could take, I could castle, and white could play b4 if I went that way. And the chess engine thinks white is just better here. Although it might still be interesting. I mean, there's no, it's after b4, it's black's turn to move. So the knight can come out here before this pawn comes forward and then work its way over to the king side somehow. And that might be interesting for getting an attack. A quick attack on the king side. With all these pawns forward, the king is probably not going to be castling queenside, and his kingside is a bit undeveloped. So I think it's an interesting position, although the chess engine thinks white is just a pawn up, and I shouldn't play like that. Anyway, after queen takes c3, let's see, yeah, we're in this position. I take with the bishop. If he takes back with the queen, the best move is just to take here, and then use that to gain a tempo with the knight. And that seems to be fine for black. So that's probably the better way to play if he takes with the queen. He took with the pawn, and then I castled. This all seems to be fine. Let's see. In the opening book, we're in this area of the opening book where there's just only 0 or 1 games, depending upon which move we're at, and then we're out of the book in a few moves. So let's just look at this page. He played e4. Again, this e4 in combination with a3 there. This resembles the Samish variation, but then the queen is here instead of back on d1, where it might more easily come out to the king side. So I'm not sure if having the queen on c2 is helpful in playing this way. Anyway, I went with d5. This seems to be okay, and he went with takes. I was curious about what happens if he played e5 here. I was planning to play knight e4. And this is an interesting way to play. It looks dangerous. It looks like that knight is about to get trapped. But it seems like there's always ways to work around this. So this is kind of similar to what happened in the game, but it happens a few moves later. So if he had played that right away, let's see, I would have gone knight e4. He might have gone bishop d3 like in the game. And then here's the trick the computer likes to play. It takes here, and then gives this check. And then the main move here is actually king to f1. If if any of these pieces come out to block, then the knight can take. So this can lead to some exchanges. Anyway, seems to be an okay position for black. So that's one way to get out of these problems. But let's see, he played c takes d5 first. I took back, and then he pushed on with e5. I played knight e4. He went bishop d3. And I played f5. And the chess engine does not approve of f5. So, it thinks, let's see, if we look at this, it thinks after a3 here that black is a little bit better. but after f5, it switches back to being white is better. So if I want to keep an even or slightly better position, it seems like I should take here. And then still queen a5 is a move. The queen a5 check. He hasn't castled yet. I could play that way. Or I could play with knight c6, which is also another way to deal with this. So now if he grabs the knight, which is not the best move, but if he grabs the knight, I can grab the d-pawn. And this seems to be okay for black as well. In fact, black is better here with some... well, it's not an immediate threat because the queen's guarding that square, but the knight is very active here. The king is not castled, and he can't bring a rook over to pin the knight. So a good position for black, better development. So that's the way to play this. f5, this gives the advantage back to white. And after e takes f6, well, let's see, knight e2 is what the chess engine preferred here. It would just live with the knight on e4. And, you know, I would be okay with this. I would think this is all right for black as well. If the knight does get chased away, it actually can come back to here and then to here to blockade that pawn. But white does have a passed pawn in this case, so that is something that white can play for in the long run. Anyway, he took f6 on f6, took en passant, and I took back with the knight. The chess engine likes queen takes. And once again, if he grabs here, well, it's a different idea this time. If he grabs the knight this time, I can pin the bishop and get it back that way. So that keeps the biggest edge. So after knight takes f6, we're back to, I don't know, more or less even position, I guess. He played knight e2, and I played c takes d4. And the chess engine did not like this. It really wanted me to just push on with d4 and lock up the structure this way. It does seem that it's time to kind of define the structure in the center so I can figure out how to develop my pieces. But I guess this is a little more advantageous for me. I get to kick that bishop back, so I gain a tempo for development, and maybe it's not so easy for that bishop to find a... Yeah, I guess it can't go anywhere that I can't just trade it off. And if you look at my bishop, it's the same color as these two center pawns. So I guess that's an accomplishment for black to trade off that light squared bishop. So that's probably why that's the way to play it. After I take, he takes back. It seems white has the advantage here. And probably it comes down to the fact that I have this light squared bishop and a light squared pawn in the center. The development seems pretty even. And I do have ideas against the king side. But it seems like white has that adequately defended too. So my attack on the king side really shouldn't amount to much. Anyway, I continue here with knight c6. He castles. Go rook e8. Just trying to figure out how to best place my pieces. And I was trying to get some pressure on this knight as a way to maybe indirectly threaten his d-pawn. Let's see. He went bishop g5 here, pinning my knight. It's kind of an annoying pin. I unpin immediately, but he's always got this threat of taking the knight and reducing the number of defenders of my d-pawn. So something to watch out for. Let's see. He played rook a to d1. Went bishop g4, so I got all my pieces off. He kicked it with f3. Actually, I was sort of provoking f3, but the chess engine thinks f3 is a reasonable move for white in this position. In fact, it was even preferring it in this position instead of rook to d1. It was saying f3 was a good move here. I suppose because it takes care, it takes squares away from my knight. And, well, I don't have a dark squared bishop, so I don't get any attack going on this diagonal. And he already has a pawn blocking it anyway, so f3 is not as weakening as it might be in many other cases. Anyway, the game went this way. Rook a d1. I brought the bishop out, and then he plays f3. So I dropped my bishop back, but it turns out, yeah, provoking that f3 move was not as much of an accomplishment as I had thought. Let's see, he went queen b2 here. The chess engine likes the queen coming to a2 and just piling up on this pawn, queen a2 and knight c6. And then maybe there's a real threat of taking the knight and grabbing the pawn here. And if I have to put my bishop behind the pawn to defend it, it's a very passive kind of position for black. So it seems like a good way for white to be playing. Anyway, he went queen b2. looking at my b pawn, and then he went bishop b1. Once again, knight to c3, piling up on this pawn as recommended. Bishop b1 wasn't particularly liked. Let's see, rook a to c8, so we're probably in the range of about even once again. Knight to g3. I go h6 here. I want to kick the bishop back and resolve this situation here. Dropped all the way back to d2. I think the chess engine slightly preferred bishop to c1. Sometimes it's a good idea to put your bishop all the way to the back rank, just so your rook has got more scope. Anyway, I continued with knight a5, hoping to get to this c4 square, which was looking pretty good, but I never managed to make it. He starts harassing my queen here, and I step to the side. Oh, this is a moment where actually I could have done a different response here. Instead of just stepping aside with the queen, I could have played knight to c4, counterattacking his queen. And that seems to lead to a position which is roughly even, say. Kicks my queen away, and now he's starting to improve his position once again. And let's see, he could follow up with bishop to g6, and this gives a definite edge to white. These bishops are very active, and crisscrossing these squares around my king, making it difficult for my rooks to find active posts. Looks like a good position for white. Instead, he continued with rook f to e1, which is kind of logical, but it allows me to drop my queen back here, and it takes away that g6 square from his bishop. So he traded once, and then he played bishop takes a5. So this had been in the cards for a while. I was willing to give up that knight and allow these pawns to be doubled in exchange for that bishop, which he might need to defend his d pawn. But maybe that wasn't such a great idea, because the d pawn is pretty securely defended by the queen and the rook, and the knight can come back if necessary to defend as well. So yeah, it's hard for me to get pressure on that pawn. So once again, white is better in this part. Let's see. I went. He went queen to c3 here. I went knight to h5, and then knight to f1. This was white's big mistake that kind of turns the tide. Maybe you watch too many of those videos that go to take is a mistake. Now here to take is the right answer. You know, taking is a mistake except when it isn't. Anyway, he should have traded and then grabbed a pawn over here. And he's just a pawn up, and I don't really have anything to show for it. He's got an extra pawn around his king. There is this weak diagonal here, but I don't have a good way to exploit it. I have a light squared bishop. My pieces aren't that well coordinated, and my pawns are under fire. Both these pawns are under attack from his queen at the moment. So that's a good position for white overall. Let's see. I did wonder about this move rook e2. It's not the best move here, but it doesn't work because the bishop can come out with a tempo, and let's see, if I move it and try to stay on the second rank, you know, my idea is to try and get the queen to g5 and coordinate against g2 there. But he can bring his queen in with c3, queen to c3, and you know, the knight is there, the rook. The rook is just not going to be able to stay on the second rank there. I can't maintain it, so that just doesn't work for me. So he should just trade. Instead, he retreated, and now after knight f4, black has a pretty persistent advantage just because of that one retreating move. It's interesting how small things like that can make a difference. But that was just way too passive. Let's see. He continued with queen c2, and I went knight e2 check. That was a mistake. So I had time on the clock still. My opponent was starting to run low on time a bit and moving quickly, and that always disconcerts me. But if I had paused to think about this position a little bit, I would have realized that rook to e2 is a much stronger move. I'm getting my rook on the second rank at a time when it's done with tempo, it's defended by the knight, and then I can, I can't go directly to the g file, but I can start maneuvering my queen around maybe like this to get to the g file, or maybe like this. Anyway, it seems like there are some attacking ideas there, and the rook on the second rank is going to be a good thing to have. So I don't know. Maybe this is one of those moments, where Bobby Fischer used to say, "Patzer sees a check, Patzer takes a check." So that's me. So this gives up a lot of my advantage. Let's see. He just went king to h1, went queen to f6. So I'm still maneuvering around trying to get to that g pawn. He goes queen h7, check. Yeah, this doesn't actually do anything for white. I had kind of figured this out, that my king gets to safety pretty quickly. Actually, the best move for white here is to challenge my knight with knight to g3, and it has nothing better than to come back to f4. And this knight stands pretty well on g3, at least it blocks my attempts my attempts to get to the g file, or to attack on the g file, and it also controls the or influences the e2 square, so I don't get rook e2 after knight f4. So that would be best play for white. Let's say instead he went for the attack. I step aside. He can check again, but I had already seen that this knight is not hanging here, so even though my king momentarily interrupts the rook from defending the knight, he can't really exploit that. And of course, a lot of times if this e-file is open, white can get a rook here with tempo. But right now his queen is under fire, so steps back with the queen. I step out of the way so my knight is defended. He goes bishop g6 now, which is still a good move, actually. Go rook f8. He goes bishop to d3, hitting my knight, chasing it away. And I took on d4 with the knight. Actually, the chess engine gives the strongest continuation here as knight to f4, and then knight to e3. The bishop is defended, so he doesn't have to move it, by trying to activate the bishop, and then queen takes. Queen takes d4. This appears to be the strongest continuation. The queen is still guarding the g-pawn, but my pieces are slowly getting a little more active. The queen is also putting pressure on the knight. Well, it's attacking the knight. The knight is hanging, so he's going to have to move that. And, and just in general, my pieces are slowly approaching the king side. And there's also this threat of bishop here. Maybe, yeah, I guess the queen and the bishop are sufficient to defend against that. Anyway, this would be a good position for black, maybe winning, maybe not. But instead I took with the knight, and this is a position where there's still only just a slight edge for black. But my opponent ran out of time at this point, and that's how the game ended. Anyway, I thought it was kind of an interesting struggle. There was a bit of a disruption from the server at one point, and so I maybe lost focus during the game, but still kind of an interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you next time. Bye.